If you've been following the news lately, you might have noticed something different. The headlines about food in Africa are starting to sound a little more cautiously optimistic. We're hearing all these new terms like systems change and resilient agriculture. But look, after decades of promises, what is really going on? Well, this explainer is going to get to the truth behind those headlines.
It really all boils down to this one simple, but let's be honest, incredibly uncomfortable question. Can Africa actually solve hunger within this decade? Or are we just, dressing up the same old cycle in new language? To figure that out, we have to start with the sheer scale of the problem. And the scale, it's just staggering. Right now, over 280 million people in Africa are undernourished. That's nearly 1 in every 5 people. Sub-Saharan Africa has the highest prevalence of hunger anywhere in the world. It's a massive challenge, but that number exists on a continent with a pretty shocking secret weapon. A secret weapon that makes this whole situation a deep, profound paradox. Because all of this is happening on a continent with Africa holds about 60% of the world's uncultivated arable land. And right there, that single fact proves something absolutely critical. Hunger in Africa is not, and has never been, a problem of just not having enough food. It's a systems problem. This contradiction is what we call the hunger paradox, and understanding it is really the key to reframing this entire problem. For decades, the world has tried to solve this paradox with one main tool, and for decades, it has failed. That tool, of course, was aid. We're talking billions upon billions of dollars that flowed in as food aid and all these donor-funded projects. But for all that effort, the needle on hunger, it barely moved in any kind of sustainable way. So let's break down why. So here's the crucial point. The traditional aid model was built on the wrong idea. It treated hunger like it was just a shortage of food. But the real issue has always been a failure of economics and governance. Aid was basically treating the symptom, not the disease. And you can see exactly how this played out. Aid usually shows up after a crisis hits, not before. It can flood local markets with free food, which makes it impossible for local farmers to sell their own crops. This, of course, discourages domestic production and creates these vicious cycles of dependency. But most critically, it almost always ignored the boring but essential stuff, things like roads, storage, and access to finance. Okay, so this really lays out the two different ways of thinking. You've got the old aid model, which is all about short-term relief, and then you have the new systems model, which focuses on making farming profitable and resilient for the long haul. It's a huge shift from charity to economics. All right, so this brings us to the new approach, redesigning the system itself. If hunger is a systems problem, well, then the system can be fixed. But it's not quite that simple. There's a massive modern challenge that's now layered on top of all the old ones. And that challenge is climate change. I mean, just look at this injustice. Africa contributes less than 4% of global carbon emissions, yet it's one of the regions that gets hit the hardest by climate shocks. We're talking unpredictable rains, droughts, floods. That's becoming the new normal, and it's making an already tough problem even harder. So, if the problem is actually getting harder, why are we even talking about optimism? Well, because for the first time, 3 really powerful shifts are happening all at once. We're seeing smarter policy, the rollout of resilient technology, and crucially, the arrival of private capital. First up, policy is just getting smarter. Governments in countries like Ethiopia and Rwanda are finally starting to move away from just managing emergencies and are now focused on building sustainable systems. They're focusing on what actually works: productivity, resilience, and creating markets that function. Second, the tech is here, and it's actually being used on the ground. Seriously, this isn't science fiction anymore. Drought-tolerant seeds, better irrigation, satellite weather data, these tools are helping farmers reduce volatility and protect their harvests even in a bad year. And third, and honestly, this might be the biggest game changer of all, private capital is finally flowing into the system. Investors are backing the things that aid always forgot: storage facilities, refrigerated transport, food processing. They're fixing the broken links in the supply chain. And this is why that investment is such a game changer. In many African countries, a staggering 30 to 40% of all food is lost after it's harvested just because of bad storage and transport. Think about that. That's not a farming problem. That is an infrastructure and a business problem, and it's one that capital can actually solve. Now, this all sounds really good, But we have to ground all this optimism in a bit of reality, because no amount of innovation or investment can easily overcome some very serious, very real-world roadblocks. First, conflict is an absolute system killer. You simply cannot grow or transport food sustainably in a war zone. Poor governance is another huge one. Corruption and unstable policies can undo years of progress overnight. And finally, there's time. The global goal of ending hunger by 2030, well, it's already slipping away. So where does that leave us? What's the new path forward? The one that's based not on blind optimism, but on realism? Well, it all starts with a new way of understanding the problem itself. And this, right here, is the core thesis. Hunger is not just a moral tragedy, it is an economic systems failure. And the most hopeful thing about reframing it that way is this. Systems, unlike charity, can be redesigned. It can be fixed. And look, success isn't going to happen everywhere all at once. It's going to happen selectively. It's going to happen sustainably. It's going to happen where the right incentives finally line up. So what are those conditions? Well, it's where farmers can actually earn a decent living growing food. It's where that food can move efficiently from the farm to the market. It's where climate risk is actively managed, not just ignored. And it's where governments help markets thrive instead of trying to replace them. Which brings us right back to our original question. With this new understanding, what's the verdict? Can Africa truly solve hunger in this decade? The answer is yes, but not everywhere and not perfectly. The countries that succeed won't be the ones that get the most aid. They'll be the ones that finally redesign their systems to make food production, distribution, and consumption actually work for the most important people in the entire chain, the people who grow the food. And that is the real story behind the headlines.